Krause here for Freethought Friday.
When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out.
Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs.
In all of science, we're looking for a balance between data and theory. You don't have to delude yourself with Iron Age fairy tales.
The same spiritual fulfillment that people find in religion can be found in science by coming to know, if you will, the mind of God.
The real world, as it actually is not evil. It's remarkable. And the way to understand the physical world is to use science.
There is a new wave of reason sweeping across America, Britain, Europe, Australia, South America, the Middle East and Africa. There is a new wave of reason where superstition had a firm hold. Teach men to reason and think for a lifetime.
I like to talk about it. So welcome to episode 202 of Freethought Friday with me, Ciarán, and
Rob. Hello.
And we also have some very special guests today. We have...
My name is Matt Berkowitz.
And...
Rachel.
Who joined us from Canada just for this, right?
That's right.
Definitely.
Flying back tomorrow.
Absolutely. And nothing to do with that trip that you're going around Europe. So Matt is going to talk to us a little bit about science appreciation and critical thinking, maybe not, depending on how the night goes. We decided to add
Irish and hospitality.
Absolutely, yes. We decided to add a little bit of liquid courage to this particular broadcast. So
how about liquid logic? I prefer liquid
logic.
Oh, we'll go with that. Liquid logic.
Nice.
That's, you trademark that now. You've got to trademark that. So.
TM Rob Coyle.
Yeah, absolutely. Liquid logic to this one. So I don't know. Do you want to start with anything in particular since our last podcast? Has anything caught your attention?
I'm trying to think. Is there anything that is particularly kind of?
Well, the big thing.
I suppose the big thing was I this year I got to shake hands with Richard Dawkins and I got to meet Lawrence Krauss, which was as cool as it fucking sounds.
Yeah, it absolutely brilliant. And in fact, we will have a special message from Lawrence Krauss
later
on,
absolutely.
or possibly I might have put it at the beginning of this podcast. So that's right. That was in Trinity College. When was that? About a month ago?
That was in February.
February.
That was towards the end of February. It is indeed.
Time
is relative.
Yeah.
So in some places it seemed not quite that long ago.
They
were doing their speaking tour around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were over. There was and my wife kind of saw it. And I went, you should go and see this. And I went, I don't know, the budget and stuff for this. And she goes, it's Richard Dawkins.
Pricey, right?
Yeah, it was very pricey. It was,
yeah.
But same thing with myself. I really balked at the price of the tickets, and actually ended up buying two because I was hoping my younger brother was going to be able to make it. But damn him, he decided to go to Vegas during that time. So,
and I'm not sure I wouldn't make the same decision. I'll be honest. I mean, Larry and Dickie. I get it.
Know.
Like, you know. But
Vegas, yeah. So he decided that
I'm testing the laws of probability in the field.
Yes,
that's what I'm doing.
I think he did that, and as expected, he lost. But so unfortunately, I got two of those very expensive tickets, and but yeah, we had a great time, and it was a fantastic talk. Richard Dawkins talked about evolutionary patterns. I think it was particular. I can't remember now the details of the talk, but it was like particular types of evolutionary patterns that you may or may not see, and he talked about a few that he has studied, and then others that may occur in the future or that may be discovered in the future. And then Lawrence Krauss was talking, I think it was one of his standard talks, he talked about
but it was with the new bicep data.
That's right,
he was talking about the implications of what that would mean, that it would take us from being able to only perceive back as far as the cosmic microwave, which is like 300,000 years or something after the Big Bang, but this would be like a couple of trillionths of a second after. It's like you're into kind of the Planck time, I think is my
I think it's what he mentioned.
It's kind of getting close to having a picture of that, which doesn't make any sense to me, because when you talk about so much happening in such a space of time, my brain just goes, that's irrelevant. So you just fast forward to when you can actually pick it up.
Yeah,
at
like
some
300,000 years.
Like
Much
I'll be
better.
honest, I'm happy with 300,000 years.
Yeah.
You know?
So that was actually fascinating because I'd seen most of his talk. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his talks, Matt, where he's talking about whether or not the universe is open, flat, or closed.
Yeah.
And then he's talking about the data caught when the circle that probe did, I think, at the southern pole. And
Yes,
that's
Bicep.
that's Bicep, right. So that's the one that we got it to about 300,000.
No, that's the one that got
That's the one.
a couple of trillions.
That's
because this
right.
is the
So before that,
quantum
they only were able to go to the
fluctuations.
300,000.
That's
Right.
it.
Sorry, I understand. Yeah.
Because it seems that like the light becomes then embedded in the actual substance because the space of the... This is my understanding. The
Right.
space of the universe... I actually sound like I know what I'm
You
talking about
really
here,
do.
but I don't. I'm just literally... I've just got a good memory and I'm literally regurgitating what he says. This makes no sense to me, but this is what he said. That at that point, the universe is so dense that the light signal cannot propagate.
Right.
So what happens is it kind of embeds itself in the kind of super dense plasma thing, and then as it expands out,
It's a real thing.
Yeah,
Science.
exactly.
Science,
Yeah,
right?
yes, that
Of
science
course.
thing.
It's got the scientific letter Xi,
Right.
is what that one stands for. The universe of and so it kind of gets embedded there, and then it kind of depolarizes something important. And that's what they were reading. They were reading the depolarizations of the cosmic microwave background.
That's
something.
very
No,
impressive.
X-rays.
memory.
X-rays. It's X-rays. It is X-rays.
Sure.
No.
That's still amazing that you remembered
Yeah.
any of those words because I remember Lawrence Kress.
Yeah.
And he was there. And he had this leather
And
jacket.
I got to ask him a question. And actually, okay, so if anyone doesn't know this, because this is a question, because I have a real problem with this, which is visualizing the universe, right? Because I imagine it, and I said it to him, I said, I imagine it like a soap bubble. He goes, yeah, loads of people do. He said, they're wrong. Basically what it is it's a membrane.
Right.
It's a four-dimensional, and at that point my brain went, I can't think of what a four-dimensional membrane is. But apparently it's a membrane.
Right.
Where a membrane, at least this is what things appear to be pointing towards, that the universe isn't a large bubble.
Right.
Expanding outward, it's a membrane in something higher dimensional.
Right.
But anyone who says they can visualize higher dimensions is lying, because obviously there's no way we can.
Yeah.
Because you just can't possibly get your head
around it. Yeah.
what does four dimensions
four
look
physical
like.
dimensions
Yeah,
look
exactly.
like. Yeah.
But he said that. But apparently that was a good stupid question to ask, because it's quite a common question.
Yeah, common question. Yeah.
But my brain now. Again, my brain doesn't understand that.
No,
I mean, it just doesn't, because I'm imagining the thick...
Perhaps the liquid logic will
Exactly,
help.
because here's what I imagine. I imagine, well, how thick is this membrane? And
Right.
because I imagine up, down, left, right, backwards and forwards, right? And I can think, well, that's 3.
Yeah.
And basically, if you start at any point and you just go infinitely, you end up at a circle, right? You end up at a sphere. Like, it's impossible not to. But no, we're not in a sphere. We're on a membrane.
Right.
Even though it's infinitely every way, apparently. But apparently, that's not a sphere.
No.
and here's me. I'm
really trying to get this.
And I was saying, and I got a chance to ask him this question afterwards, right? And I went, I just can't get my head around it. He goes, well, what do you think? I went, no, come on, you're Lawrence Krauss. It's like, what does it matter what I think? I didn't even do maths in college. So,
I think you're great.
whatever you say,
Whatever
Larry,
you say.
that's what I believe. Literally whatever you say.
That's how, and that, of course, Matt, is how
critical
science
thinking
works.
right
It's
there.
whatever the most smartest person
Absolutely.
or apparently smartest
Well,
person
no,
in the room
here's
says.
the point. I mean, yes, of course, but this is an interesting question to have, right? So the scientific method, okay. So, and I think we've dealt with this before.
Yeah.
So I don't have a training in science, right? What I have is I just have the. I want to be as right as often as possible and believe as little that is wrong as often as possible.
That's a good quote.
Yeah, it's great. Like, isn't it? It's like, because it kind of
This
goes.
is Dillahunty? Is that how
Well,
that
he
is?
says that a lot.
Oh, he says a lot,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry.
it's great. No, so I don't have time to acquire the academic knowledge required to decipher the paper, so that therefore if someone says, well, here's my thought, I go, great, well, I've got to go read that, then I've got to go read all the other things. Like, I just don't have time for that, and like, I would need
Most of us don't.
Exactly.
Most of us don't.
So I have my. And I don't know, like, what would you call it? Like, my shoots of credibility to bullshit, right? So depending on like, if Deepak Chopra is just bullshit, so whatever he believes, I kind of go, well, I'm not believing that. Like, that's just nonsense. Like, because the chances are it's nonsense. Because 85%, and I'm only allowing 15%, maybe 100% of what he says is nonsense.
Yeah.
I'm just assuming I'm not assuming everything he's saying isn't nonsense. I'm assuming some of it has got some basis in reality. And then you kind of go, Sam Harris, I believe everything that guy says.
Yeah.
Like I pretty much do.
Yeah.
You know.
Good man.
It's
Yeah, pretty much.
you know, I mean, it's but that's not
Especially
that's not the
people say-
scientific method.
No,
I just
no.
did the X Factor first.
Is it because he looks like Ben Stiller?
No, it's absolutely.
We
not
were
because he
talking
looks
about
like
this
Ben
earlier
Stiller.
on, and Rachel is pretty much insistent it's because of a Ben
It's
Stiller.
when he said-
It's because he's beautiful.
Yeah,
It's-
see, that's
He is absolutely compelling, and I know like I've been doing.
compelling.
He's compelling.
He's compelling,
I think,
which is
I think
this
you
how a straight guy goes. I have a crush on him.
You
Like,
you
yeah.
went one step further than I did.
Oh, I would find him compelling. I would find him, yeah. Like my wife says when I go to job interview, be a bit more like Sam Harris. You know,
In what way, dear?
because this doesn't get you a job. Apparently this
Sam
is
Harris
too
would.
high energy. Oh yeah, Sam Harris. Who is not going to employ Sam Harris? The Samaritans.
Well,
They're not going to employ
no,
Sam.
no,
That's
no.
the only job he can't
Maybe
do.
ISIS, I don't
Absolutely.
know. Although I don't know, maybe they look for
Absolutely.
some advice. I don't
Yeah.
know. But you are right. It's not actually the scientific method, and I suppose
Yeah.
we there is a chain of trust here. I was trying to explain.
Chain of trust is a good word. Yes,
I
like
was
that.
trying to explain to a friend of mine when he was asking something similar, and I was saying in relation to, like, for example, a mobile app on your phone. If I asked you the question, what's the weather like? Well, you could look out or listen to the rain as we're hearing at the moment, or you could take out your phone and see what the app is saying. And there's a whole bunch of trust in there. You're assuming that what is being displayed is correct. And this is a big question in voter verifiable audit trails for electronic voting. And then you're assuming that the data has been interpreted correctly and programmed correctly, and then is being received correctly from the server, and that however it was entered was correct, and that all the mathematical models behind it are correct. So, but
Did you just study that recently in college?
No.
Like I said, 'cause
No.
that seemed like that just came from
No,
right the
I-
front of your brain, man.
I've talked to a friend of mine about this. I've used this particular example a few times.
Here's what I've prepared
Here's
earlier.
what I prepared earlier, most definitely.
I wasn't even prepared.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared for that one. But I think we can reasonably go, well, look, that makes sense. And if it starts to break down, then we can question it.
Yes.
And our willingness to do that, I think, is what's different to, I'll just accept what Deepak Chopra says and not question
Well,
it.
Yeah.
I would say it's rather dangerous actually if we just have these go-to individuals that
Yeah.
we trust. I think we need to.
Unless it's Sam Harris.
Well, no, even for Sam Harris, for anyone, whatever the scientific issue is, I think we need to look at what the consensus of experts agree upon in whatever the field is. And the second we get bogged down with, well, this person says this person says that, we're liable to make more errors. So I think we need to understand more what the term is called, preponderance of evidence.
Preponderance of evidence.
So basically, what
Yeah.
the bulk of the findings are amongst a particular scientific community, rather than just what our favorite individuals think.
Yes. Right.
That will lead us along the
That
path
is the best way.
more often than not.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, right. Okay. Now, and this is my question. So, there's absolutely that exactly what you just said there. How could anybody argue with that? This is what most of the smartest people, and when most of the smartest people all think the same thing.
Yeah.
That should be a pointer. To
Well, chances are that we're likely to be heading in the right direction. It's certainly no guarantee, and there's been plenty of examples in science where the smartest people thought things were right and they were in fact wrong. But you are right that the preponderance of evidence plus the general scientific consensus should be a good enough point to allow you to go, well, yes, it's likely climate change is real, and it's likely that it's
And
probably...
the people who are going to overturn that are not people sitting behind their computer screens doing activism on Facebook.
Yes.
It's supposed to be other
Or
scientists.
voting
Yeah.
videos.
Yeah.
And again,
That's
this
true.
comes up to something that I know you've talked about, Matt, which is like perspective, which is knowing the source of the opinion. Like, in other words, is it an academic opinion that is being uncorrupted or uninfluenced by any other considerations, or are you being paid by the oil lobby to say that climate change isn't
We
man-made?
wish. We wish.
Well, actually, this is something particularly of interest with Matt. He's pretty sure that he is being sponsored by Monsanto,
I'm
right?
still waiting
For
for my
everything,
shill
but you're
check.
still waiting for your check.
But
Yes.
Tight bastard.
He's been accused of it on several occasions, and he's still waiting for that cash to come in.
Yeah.
But do you know what? There was a brilliant in the rebooted series of Cosmos, which we're big fans of.
Yeah.
With Neil deGrasse Tyson, where I can't remember the name of the guy in question.
Oh, the lead
scientist.
paint. The lead paint fella.
Yes.
Fantastic. I'm sure he's thrilled that his contribution to history, we remember him as the lead
The
paint
lead paint
fella.
fella, yeah.
On
But
Cosmos.
Yeah, on Cosmos,
I
yeah.
don't even know what episode. Oh, sorry, man. Hang on, I'm going to find that out.
Yeah,
That's wrong.
We all have Google.
We all have Google. We need
Yeah,
to
exactly.
find
Yeah,
that.
someone else do it. I'm doing a podcast. I'm drinking at the same time. I'm multitasking.
That's right. Well,
Yeah, I'm
one of our
people.
9 fans can do it. Yes, you can do it yourselves. But a brilliant episode, but where this scientist is fighting what seems to be an establishment, but was really actually the chorus of one other scientist being propagated by oil companies at the time. But he was pretty certain that the data pointed that his conclusions about the amount of lead in the atmosphere were correct, and of course he had to go to quite extreme lengths. Ultimately, I think to the Antarctic to get his core samples to show that the science backed up the claim he was making, the data backed up the claim he was making. And
according to this,
so we do follow the consensus until the data shows otherwise, and
science.
then until more science. That's it.
Yeah.
When we do more science, and then we find no, actually that consensus, there's reason to doubt it now.
Yeah.
So so that's a different process, definitely, from we'll just trust Deepak Chopra, or indeed we'll just trust Sam Harris. So
I mean, as I've said in the last one, I would love to know what Christopher Hitchens' opinion now of the Iraq invasion.
Yeah, you asked him. Yeah, when we discussed
Because
during our Charlie Hebdo episode.
I just can't imagine that he would be behind what happened. I can't imagine that at some point he would have gone, Jesus, man. Yeah, I mean, I was all for getting rid of Saddam, but not like this.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't what I meant.
Yeah, I would have high hopes anyway that he would, when faced with new data, at least reevaluate the position or clarify how much he would have supported, in what way would have supported, or maybe qualify his support that he originally gave. So I of course this is what we don't really know.
Exactly.
But the other I wanted to bring up another thing, but before I did you guys have anything else you wanted to say about that?
No.
Right. Well, just the other thing of particular interest to me that's going on at the moment, but I think is back to, I feel should be a question of science, but most certainly isn't, is that Ireland is currently preparing for its 2 very important referendums. The most important of which is whether or not we want Niall Horan from One Direction being our next president. We're looking but we are looking at lowering the age of presidential candidates from 35 to 21. So I don't know. Of course, just
there's another little thing that's going to be in the ballot paper as well. But
there's some other minor issue to do with equality and marriage and
21 years old.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Why not?
Well, so
you don't think Elon Musk, whenever he was 21, wouldn't have run any country that was being run at that time better than the people running that country were running it. I'm like, let's get the child geniuses in and run the bleeding place.
What's the chances of the ones
child
going
genius,
forward being child genius?
Well, definitely more if we actually allow them in. I mean, we can definitely say that. That's just like,
It's an interesting one, actually. Just I think a number of people have said either they've gone to the extremes of, you could have candidates like that running, but of course, most people
they're assuming that the public are going to go, we're going to vote Niall Horan from One Direction as a huge joke on the world.
I hope.
Well, when in Ireland.
Listen, we sent Dustin to the Eurovision and we went, oh Jesus, we overplayed that hand a bit there. No, we didn't mean to do that. Sorry, lads.
We've learned our lesson. But I suppose to that other minor point, which is of course the vote on same-sex marriage, which as I understand it, assuming it passes, and that is by no means a done deal, Ireland may then become the first ever country to vote in by popular vote.
Yes.
Marriage equality.
Yes.
Because every other country
realised we
courts.
didn't need to. We just made it a law anyway. We didn't actually need to check.
I'm putting this as a feather in our cap, but actually,
it's
fucking arseholes.
Yeah. It's actually a quirk of our constitution. Nothing can be changed without people being consulted. But I am
which is possibly why we're not the most entrepreneurial country in the world. It's like I just need to go check with the boss.
Yeah, just check with the boss. Yeah. Aren't you the boss?
Yeah.
I've been doing some campaigning, and I've had some very interesting comments at the doors, and I've been very lucky.
Has anyone been negative at all?
Negative or as in
As in
abusive?
No, as in I'm voting no.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
well then.
So in fact, one of the things I do want to say to our 9 fans who are listening is that
We should get their names.
Yeah,
really.
we should get our 9. Yeah.
We could name each episode after them. This is episode
that would
7.
be
This is
great.
called Sarah.
Oh my god, I was just thinking Sarah.
We could.
Wow.
We should definitely do that.
There is a god.
And yes.
If there's a Sarah out there,
Should we just quit this? I mean, if there is. Oh, dear. Anyway.
Deepak was right! It is all one unit of consciousness experiencing ourselves!
I quit.
There is a Sarah right now listening to this.
This is her, and she's going, it's me. It's
Yeah.
me.
Like,
They picked me."
what?
So when I
He
was...
might be dead now. Our son has died.
Our son has died.
If you find this, we were a large tentacled organisation.
We when we were doing our canvassing, we found based on the various house estates that we went around that we're probably talking about 59% yes, not the 78 or 82.
Yeah,
that
I
proposed
would.
no.
I thought that seemed a little bit.
Yeah, but the no's were in about 19%,
Yeah.
and then we decided to conservatively put the don't knows and the wouldn't says into the no branch.
Yes.
So just to see what it was like. So in fact, the very first house on my very first day of canvassing was a no, but
Excuse me.
but the lady who I engaged with was very polite, very respectful, and gave myself and the other canvasser a ridiculous amount of time, like far more than I would have expected
good.
anyone at an indoor. And so we talked.
Well, I think
but,
people understand that people who are canvassing for this aren't necessarily political parties. Like this is
Yeah.
a matter of conscience and a matter of heart and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And so
it's
you're
it's
not
defi-
shilling for
yeah,
anything. Do you know what I mean?
It's definitely a different response, and
Yeah.
even the politicians who are going out with us are going out under a Yes Equality campaign banner rather than as the party represented us. So that certainly has changed the attitudes, and that's great. But this very nice lady who'd be about the same age bracket, I think, as my own parents, was voting no, and her logic went something along the lines, and it was coming from a good place, but it went something along the lines of, children have it very hard today, she doesn't want children to be bullied, a child with 2 dads will be bullied, therefore let's not have that child
Yeah,
go
that's
home
just
to a
dumb
real
old
family.
person
What
shit.
about
Like it just is. Like
Child with 2 mums.
Yeah. Well, no. They focus on the men, but it would equally in her head. I guess it would equally be
and this
problematic.
is
but of course, the logic
this is a
here
great
is
problem. But this is a huge problem. And actually,
Yeah.
let's discuss this because I think that opens something up. Because
Yeah.
this is about levels of norm.
right.
And so I think you kind of go like from a 70-something person's point of view.
Yeah.
So it's 2015 now. So say they were born in the 30s, 1930s,
30s, 40s.
They would have been born while Europe was at war.
Yeah.
Okay, or shortly in and around in that case.
You mean the emergency? Because we didn't
We
have
might
a war.
we might have an international viewer
Right.
or listener.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
the war.
The war
The
for people
great
outside
war
of Ireland.
if you're American.
Yeah.
The unfortunate occurrence if you're in a bunch of other countries.
and the emergency
always.
if you're
Exactly.
part of Ireland.
Exactly.
Which we'll explain never. Go on.
Right, so they would have grown up in a time when homophobia was institutionalized, and it was the norm, even in not particularly kind of secular countries, but it just was. It was the way of things. So they look on that as an aberration. Like they are actually culturally programmed to see that there is something wrong.
Right.
So they're wrong.
Right.
So they're just wrong, and this is where you get down to democracy. This is where you get to like, their vote shouldn't count the same.
Yes.
You know, like I hate to say it, but it kind of shouldn't.
Well, this is what I was getting to when I got to the end of this
Yeah.
canvassing. I was kind of going.
Which is the only problem I have with Russell Brand, which is that because of people
That's
like
the only
him.
problem you have.
Yeah, I think Russell Brand's on the right track, but I think this is dangerous now because of what's happening in England. Because if the youth don't turn out to vote,
Yeah.
like this is the problem with it is that like the nutters always show up.
Yeah.
The nutters.
Well, in
always
fact,
show up.
that's one of the biggest concerns about this particular campaign is it's not that there isn't actually support for it, it's that we need to get that support to actually go out and
Actually
vote
show
up.
Yeah,
and if
exactly.
they don't, it will,
Because you
it
can
will
bet
be
your
won by
ass
the
the no
nutters.
side are going
Yeah.
to come out in
Of
force.
course. And this then brings us to a question. I two questions. One in relation to science and one in relation to democracy in my head. Science. The scientific consensus, of course, is not done by democratic vote. We don't have people deciding whether or not to accept that 300,000 is our kilometres per
Whether we can
second, the
round
speed of light,
high up
which
as
I
they
know it's
wanted
not.
to
Or,
apparently
yeah,
some place in the States a couple of years ago.
Just decided that's what we're doing, and therefore it's the case. Yeah. So we don't do this with science, and science is answering very, very important and precise questions as best it can.
Yes.
This to me seems far more important in everyday real life for many people, and so I don't understand why we hand this, an even more important decision, over to the whim of however people might be feeling about the government, or about their own particular cultural upbringing, or about the gays down the street that they do like or don't like or whatever. And of course it runs both ways. I mean, I want this to pass, and obviously I prefer a yes vote, but I have read comments on all sides and they are just diabolical.
They're horrific.
Absolutely,
Well,
without any kind of critical
Well,
thought.
obviously, science and skepticism and evidence-based decision-making isn't a priority of a value to most people out there. It's more tradition or subjective whim.
I would say it's alien. I don't even. I mean, we weren't taught it in school.
Yeah.
I only learned about the scientific method and critical thinking within the last half decade. I'm 44. I spent most of my life not even understanding what the scientific method was. Never having been. I went to a good school. You know?
And it would be the same at university level.
Actually, I went
as
to
well.
a shit school. They just charged a lot of money to give you a thing that they told me was a good education.
But you believed it was good. Therefore,
It was this is faith-based critical thinking.
unfortunately, you can't pay with fixed credits.
Absolutely. We only accept the face of Caesar. Render unto us.
So, yeah, and this is that. I think you're absolutely right, Rob. It's actually an alien a value to most people.
Like, people think it's weird over I don't know what it's. You've lived in Canada all your life?
I have, yeah.
Okay, right. So my impression of the Canadian education system is that it's a lot better than ours. It'd be an awful lot more
It
secular.
always seems better on the other side. Though,
Right. So it's just the same.
Same shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Same shit.
yeah.
I mean, you go through science, but you're not really taught how scientific skepticism works, or how the scientific method really works in practice.
Because school, I was
Not
thinking.
really.
Actually, hearing you say that, you realise school isn't set up for actual critical thinking.
No.
Oh no!
The entire education, the education system itself, ain't set up for. Well, actually, I think, sir, or I think, miss.
Yeah.
I tried recently. I've been just doing a little bit of lecturing. I tried with my first years who I didn't expect to be any more critical thinking than I was when I was a first year many years ago, and I tried to get them to critically analyse what I was doing.
Right.
Now, not in any kind of deep way, but just I attempted to actually, when I made a mistake, I mean, our natural reaction is to try and hide it or cover that up, whatever. And I attempted instead to go, oh look, I actually made a mistake.
Yeah.
So on 2 occasions, I was actually to say, I got this wrong.
Yeah.
Or on one particular occasion, or what I said to a couple of them. So these are students doing computer programming. So I was trying to say, let's do a little bit of a scientific experiment in Bunny Rabbit Ears. But if we, the student or myself, whatever, understand what we think we do anyway in relation to a particular code, then before you run your program, before you compile it, predict what you think the result will be, and then see if that's the case, and then do it a few other times and maybe try to break it. Because if you do understand it, then you should know what you can do to change this. And so I got them to do that, and I did it a bit for them.
We do with baking, naturally.
Yes, in fact we do.
Listening to you say, that's baking.
That
You
is
describe baking.
Which was
You don't just kind of go, I made it terrible.
now,
Make it the same way
baking and
again.
not bacon. Okay, we're not getting into this
No,
again.
but there's a way to bake
Well, no,
bacon,
because you don't
which
say
is...
bacon, you say rashers.
Yeah, rashers. Yeah.
Though I think baking bacon is quantum mechanics. I think is actually what we're talking about. I think that's what that is.
But yeah, so I can definitely see. I mean, I know it was the case when I was going through college, and it still is the case that this is not a priority, even for the science faculty within which I'm placed. And one of the questions I did ask of some of the staff in
Do you know
my
it might
department.
be the only place that... Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem.
One of the only places they may actually teach that without actually even knowing it is foundation year in art college. If you go to NCAD, the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, you don't choose what you're going to be studying in art until your second year, because for the first year they call it foundation year, and you just do everything. You do sculpture and textiles and ceramics and life drawing and everything. Because their basic process is you don't know what might actually set you up on fire.
Yeah.
So they're trying to do the opposite of critical thinking. They're trying to open up your thinking, like
Yeah,
broaden
yeah,
your
yeah,
horizons,
yeah.
remove any barriers and
Right.
stuff to it. Whereas what we need is like, that's do it that way, but the barriers we need to remove is dogma and a priori considerations and stuff like that.
Right,
So, yeah,
right.
That's
Yeah.
wrong. That's one kind of Stella talking now.
Okay. but I think that in general you're right in relation to how we should approach it.
Yeah.
But I certainly, if I'm not seeing it within even the faculty of science, and I don't get the impression that the university that I'm at the moment is somehow unique in this. I get the impression that this is standard.
Yeah.
That because I was asking some members of a couple of different departments within the faculty, is there even a broad kind of science 101, science method 101, or science history 101 even?
Yeah.
Because even doing science history, as I've
Yeah.
learned quite a bit from Cosmos, would give you an indication of why we now do things
Yeah.
the way we do, and why there was a need for peer review
Yeah.
and consensus
Absolutely.
and understanding of confirmation bias and all these things. And that's not even done. And so
Jesus.
which apparently the philosophy department seems to be, which is not
Which is kind of weird.
which is the a part of the Faculty of Arts, is the only one interested in either critical thinking and its application to science.
Yeah.
They also do other courses in application to other areas like literature reviews and whatever else, but they do at least do a course on critical
Then
thinking and science.
wouldn't that be quite beautiful if it turned out that actually the ideal
Yeah.
emergence is a kind of a hybrid of philosophical approach to thinking and the scientific method to evidence gathering and evaluation.
Yeah.
But if you actually combine the two of those, you make this kind of this uber world view, which is like kind of unbelievable intellectual honesty and rigorousness.
Yeah.
One of the best courses we watched is done by the Teaching Company.
Right.
On the great courses, it was done by Stephen Novella, if you're familiar with
Oh
him.
yeah, I've heard. Yeah,
He's a neurologist who-
yeah.
he runs the Skeptic Guides to the Universe podcast and sciencebasedmedicine.org. Anyways, it's called Your Deceptive Mind, and he goes through a lot about the different cognitive biases that are at play in everyday interaction, communication.
Love that stuff.
And just how bad our brains are at processing information and how fallible our memories are.
Yeah.
And then it also goes into basically a briefer on basically how the scientific method works, looking at topics like scientific consensus, the phenomenon of science denialism and conspiracy theories and all that kind of good stuff.
No doubt.
Sorry?
Pseudoscience as well.
Exactly, yes. Goes into all that great stuff. They're basically, I think it was maybe 30 courses, half an hour each. It's a fantastic...
Really?
And they're up there kind of on the internet?
I think you have to pay for it, but you might be able to torrent it.
Okay.
Cool. Well, we
If you know
probably
where to look.
won't put the torrent link on it, but we'll certainly put a link towards, we'll give the name, and you can do whatever you want, and we'll also put maybe the link to the paid site as well, just so if people want to go to it. That sounds absolutely fantastic, and sounds like the kind of... Yes, no, we'll edit that out.
This is rock and roll atheism, folks.
But Novella, I think, is one of the most fantastic voices in the skeptic movement. He's a real... I hate to use the word hero, but he's one of my go-to people if I want to check out, where I might want to start looking at the research.
And is he as beautiful as Sam Harris?
Unfortunately not.
All right, okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's all it's about, really.
Yes, it really is.
That's
Absolutely.
how you...
Well, now, can I just being a skeptic here, can I just say that one heterosexual male here evaluating the objective beauty of another heterosexual male in the presence of a female and a homosexual male may not be the person whose opinion we wish to count on this matter.
That's true. That's true.
Stephen Novella may be a hunk of a man, as far as we all know.
But yes, so the data we'll Google him later.
I mean, if he looks like Angelina Jolie, I'm going to disagree with this guy and go, he's a good-looking dude, that guy. He's a good-looking dude.
He's very smart.
He's very...
and cultured, perhaps.
Oh, he has a good personality, doesn't he?
Right.
Oh, he has a good personality. Oh, he knows loads.
He'd be a really good friend.
All right, so this bit...
We're definitely editing that bit out, definitely. That's what you call ad hominem, very fucking sure.
Right, so that's I guess where we're at with where I'm at in relation to canvassing for the marriage equality campaign.
Did any no opinion obviously not give you pause for thought? What was the hardest no question you were asked?
We didn't get very many. That lady in particular gave us quite a bit of information on what her thought process was, but it was very easy to understand where she was going wrong, and it was obvious that there was a desire to not question what didn't want to question what she was thinking too hard, because she liked that logic.
Yes.
I honestly, genuinely don't think she was being homophobic.
No.
But she was
thinks...
comfortable with the answer and didn't want the answer to change, so there was no more analysis going to be done there.
Yeah.
Most of the other people who were no's were either just very just no, and I don't want to talk about it any further, or we were able to infer no from body language. Gotcha. or just their reaction.
Could you infer demographic clusters?
Yes, absolutely. The estate we were in was actually an old estate, but it also had a newer part built onto it.
Yes.
And in the older part, it was predominantly no, and it was predominantly elderly people, or older people, I should say, not elderly people. And in the new estate, it was predominantly younger families or single people, and they were predominantly yes. So it's very, very clear, which does gel with the polls that we have.
Completely.
That
so it depends on who you ask.
Demographically, it has been the case. We had we also though had a number of.
Which means now I know a little bit about the demographics of Ireland, which is so the Pope's children, who are the people who are my age, because the Pope came in 1979. So if you're old enough, if you were born in the kind of the 7 years before that or the 2 years after, you represent the largest demographic bump, a kind of a ball moving through a kind of a tube of people in terms of the number of people who are in that. So if my demographic, if the David McWilliams of this world, if the Pope's children show up to vote, it will pass.
Right.
It just will, because there's just enough of us in that line that it doesn't matter how many 70-year-olds show up. If we show up en masse, it's a done deal. Providing, as I think the polls show, that people of our age are like by vast majority in favour of this, like something like 72%.
No, it's very, very high, and with even people younger than us, not even that much younger than us, it's going up into the 80s.
And you would hope 80s. So, exactly.
Yeah. So certainly those demographics support that. The other question, sorry, I was going to ask or just pose in relation to this particular campaign, of course, is the information. Obviously, there seems to be, I won't say there definitely is, but there seems to be no logical or rational basis on which to reject this proposal, in terms of, irrespective of one's personal view of whether or not marriage should or shouldn't even be a regulated matter, and that's a whole other question. But assuming one is applying it to one part of the population, there seems to be no reason why it shouldn't be applied to the other.
Yes, you have to. You have to wish to discriminate. You have to wish to stop tax-paying consenting adults from enjoying something that everybody else in the state enjoys for no other reason than you just want to stop them. There is no other reason. I mean, the politicians have actually done quite a good job. They've separated the childcare issue out of this, I think, quite beautifully. The No campaign have been incredibly successful. Whoever is doing their messaging is doing it very bloody well.
And they keep trying to link it, of course.
Exactly.
But my and this is where I would differ on the with the Yes Equality campaign on this. Rather, while it is certainly true, I don't know if this is the case. I don't know. Are there referendums that often in Canada, or do they ever occur? Or?
Not very often.
No, right.
So occasionally.
We seem to have quite a few of them, although sometimes not as many, or certainly not as interesting ones as I'd like.
Is that because? Well, I think it's because we basically have a Middle Ages constitution. I think that's what it might be. That might have. We're lucky electricity was actually allowed in the fucking constitution. It was written. We won't have any of that devil's lightning there now.
No, we don't have that. I did make the point to somebody many years ago that actually we had made as many amendments in the last 70 years of our constitution as the US had made in the 200 plus years of theirs. And either...
But they did start off with all men are created equal.
That's true.
That did give them a bit of a leap
ahead. So either theirs isn't particularly worth changing, or ours just is changing far too often. But anyway, there are other circumstances. But in relation to this particular... Sorry, I lost my train of thought there in relation to the Constitution.
You were talking about the number of referendums.
Oh, yeah. So our referendums tend very seldom to be about the actual question that's being asked, because the question being asked is simply changing the wording in relation to the constitutional provision for providing for marriage, and it's a very simple word change. Although the Irish one, as I was telling the guys here earlier, almost invalidated all straight marriages.
Yes.
But they have only in Ireland, but they have altered that. So
but
that,
we did make
Texas.
and
and Texas.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's correct. Rachel was telling me,
Right.
and apparently they were.
Oh, there is a Dublin in Texas as well. It is one thing. There is. So that's it. You've got
dear,
this.
that's not the state we want to link
To be
ourselves
fair, Nick,
with.
we did make ecstasy legal for a few hours in this country
Right.
earlier on this
Yes,
year, so
yeah,
you know.
no, yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's some changes happening in Ireland. But
That was to get us ready for gay marriage, you see. That was what that was the fucking joy we were going to feel then, you know.
Dropping a bombshell.
That's
first,
it.
right?
Absolutely.
Assless chaps and whistlers. You know?
No, I don't want to try them again. So you were saying that the no side.
Don't pull this on me.
No. Well, you see now the assless chaps is distracting me. The no side. You're right. We're trying to bring the issue of children and relationships and surrogacy and a whole bunch of other things in it, which either have been effectively dealt with in law now, or are not being dealt with in law at the moment, and the referendum will have nothing to do with it anyway.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, my approach to this would differ from the Yes campaign in that I would like to actually deal with those questions in order to get them out of the way, and rather than hide them. Because I would deal with them with logic and reason and data. Yeah, but the problem is that is not the way people vote, and so of course the Yes campaign.
I don't think that's the. I think this is. You see, I don't think people are going.
So I will put.
We were talking about the referendum.
Yeah, the referendum. Yeah,
and we were talking about if there was any
logical reason to say no. Yeah, and
there isn't,
and there definitely isn't, and so.
Well, no, there is if you believe the Bible. Actually, and here's the point. If you believe the Bible, if you believe the Bible, if you believe the Bible is actually even filtered through thousands and thousands of years, the distilled, man-influenced, but still kind of opinion of God, then actually there's a very logical reason to vote no for this. Like, there really is. Yeah. But it does require you to believe the fucking Bible. Like.
Yeah. It actually, you're right. You have to actually choose another worldview of some sort to actually go. Then this is worth voting for.
And I think this is. Sorry to interrupt, but I think I'm thinking about my parents kind of here. And I'm thinking about the education they got. I'm thinking about the world they grew up in, and every signal they received from authority, and they had the martial imposition of authority. They grew up in a world where like corporal punishment in school was not only allowed, it was every day and commonplace. Yeah. And you were weird. Like you were actually considered aberrant and indulgent of children's whims. If you went, well, maybe you shouldn't threaten your kids and enforce your will on them with violence. Like you were considered weird and creepy if you kind of said stuff like that. And encouraging crazy stuff.
It was only, I think, 1973 that the American Psychological Association declassified homosexuality as a disease.
That's correct, yeah.
Exactly.
So you're right, even one doesn't even have to go back to the 50s or 60s in terms of...
Jesus, it was illegal here until what?
93. Yeah. And that's
22 years ago.
Oh
my God! I got the internet in 1994.
Yeah, it took.
So homosexuality not being a crime came in 1 year before the internet. Now that's good fucking timing.
I was just gonna say someone knew it was coming down. Gay porn. So we should really check and see who did that in probably the Irish government.
Conspiracy.
Definitely. One of the things, though, because you're absolutely right, that's the only way one could decide I'll vote no or whatever. And of course, this is the problem in general with voting on anything, be it in a democratic or slightly less democratic way. But one of the things I have been trying to do is I've been trying to convince some friends of mine who are still sitting on the fence in relation to they're sitting on the fence, as I was saying earlier on, in relation to all issues that are around the referendum, but none of which are to actually do with the referendum.
Such as.
So one of their concerns is in relation. I'm sorry, I say there because there's a couple here. Although I think one of them is definitely leaning towards the yes, and the other wants to because he's friends with me, but hasn't decided yet whether or not he will.
Oh, okay. So this is our age.
Sorry?
This would be somebody in and around our age?
Oh, yes. They'd be our age, all right.
I'm interested to hear this.
And again, I think I describe them as traditionalist rather than conservative. But their feeling basically is they're not entirely. So as I said, this has nothing to do with the referendum per se, but it's to do with children and whether or not 2 men or 2 women raising a child could potentially do any kind of or provide any kind of negative consequences.
Really?
So,
Honestly, really?
Well, their view is not that. Actually, I'm sorry, I might be misrepresenting it. They have said they believe in the hierarchy of good parenting. Essentially, that's what I call it.
I think everybody agrees that good parenting is better than not good parenting.
Yeah, but they believe in a hierarchy, as in that straights do it best, all things being equal. Then gays.
Okay. So here's the let's break this down because I've heard this before. Okay, so what we have is in gold position. We have a man and a woman who love each other.
Yes.
Okay.
And are married.
And are married.
Yes.
Now, let's say we have a man and a woman who love each other, but they don't love each other as much as the gold position.
Yeah.
But we have 2 guys or 2 girls who love each other as much as the gold position parents. Yeah. Where do they come versus these straights?
Well, this is in fact the exact reasoning that I've been trying to use with them in order to try and get them to understand how illogical the position that they put forward, at least in the way that they have, is. And what I have found is that, and as I said, these are very good friends of mine, so they have a reason to want to try and vote yes. All right, they may have a cultural reason to try and push them towards the no side, but they have a very personal and emotive reason to want to vote yes. They're very good friends of ours, and they really want this to happen, but they're not sure they can give themselves permission. That's the way I understand it, essentially.
Yeah, because we know that reason is certainly not based by science. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They've done multitude of studies. I'm not that familiar with this area, but they've done a lot of studies on homosexual parenting and also single mothers and fathers, and there's no real significant difference in how the children turn out at all.
Yeah, so the studies that have...
Believe it or not, apparently from my amateur position, position, being married for 20 for 13 years but not actually having any children, is that apparently how the parents feel about the child is the biggest determinant of how happy that child is.
That's
not what the parents do with each other when the child ain't around.
Quite surprising.
Who would have thunk it?
Yes, that's quite surprising. I just would not
really
have thought it. But what I find interesting with these particular people is that I'm trying to actually get them to go down a logical route, because I actually have all the time in the world, so to speak, to actually do that with them. And in fact, because they're raising very specific points which can be taken down using logic and reason and evidence and whatever. And so there are some very clear statistics on this, even if you weren't willing to concede what you've just said through own personal experience. And what I have found is I bring them through that information and that data, and then they're coming back at me with questions like, well, how can we trust that data and not trust other data? And so this is why I thought it was interesting when you were talking about, well, how do I trust this and not that? And I don't have the time to go through all the papers. So I was trying to think about that and try to explain it to them, and which is why I had my weather example to hand, because I used it in this discussion with them. And
I'll just interrupt for a second.
Sure.
It's funny how a lot of these discussions end up deferring to the question of how do you assess scientific research?
Yes,
exactly.
Right?
Absolutely. This always comes down to
this is actually what I was getting to. Yeah, it's this to me is yet another indication with people who are my age, educated in a roughly similar way, similar kind of socioeconomic background, and all those other things being even, because I have a particular interest in actually wanting the philosophical position that I want. My desire to know exceeds my desire to believe. That has brought me down one path, and because their desire to believe exceeds their desire to know, it's brought them down a completely different path. But the consequences of this are very serious, and not even to them, but to me, because they're voting on something which is why it's so important to me that I think we need to change this in society, and it's a pervasive problem.
Yes,
it's funny how people aren't trained to think of these problems in scientific or skeptical or evidential terms.
Yeah.
It's more like, oh, this is a political or traditional issue. And no, it's based. It actually does break down to empirical facts.
The facts, absolutely.
Right. Does Vancouver or does Canada have a religious-based education system?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's truly secular.
It is, I mean, like, at least in BC, speaking where I grew up, it's a very secular province.
Okay.
And yeah, the public schools, no, there's nothing religious at all about them.
Okay, because we have like over 70, 80, I'm sure it may even be higher now, kind of what the schools here, or kind of the Catholic Church runs the schools. Now, a fundamental, like one of those, like the first pre-germ seed of my atheism was doubting Thomas. Right, the story of doubting Thomas, because Jesus comes back from the dead on Easter Sunday and he walks in and all the apostles like, deadly it's you, and Thomas goes, well, I just want to put my hand in your hands and my hand on your side, and they all like Thomas is a dickhead. I'm like, that's perfectly normal, like that's perfect. So the Catholic Church or religion, from my point of view, which is the one I grew up on, venerated faith. Like it wasn't just like I don't think.
And eviscerated.
Exactly, it
doubt.
Eviscerated doubt.
Yeah.
And went doubt is a bad thing.
Yeah.
So I think I think that's why we're at this position now, because people have actually been told, like from the get-go, on pain of eternal
You're
suffering.
gonna have that false certainty, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Turn that questioning mind off.
Yeah. If you do that, you're as bad as one of the guys who's almost.
You
as bad.
rejected Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to go that far, that's what you are. Because Jesus, even blessed is he who believes and
has
does
not
not
seen.
see, and has not seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was one thing in me that just went, that's kind of nonsense.
Yeah.
You know.
You touched on, I think, a focal point as to what many of the side effects of religion are. A lot of people say, "Oh, what's the harm in religion?" You know, it's even if they don't really believe in it, it's harmless.
Yeah.
But if it does shut you off from questioning a lot of pretty much everything.
There's a bit I do in one of my routines, and it's about kind of atheism, and my issue with it is this: like the reason why they have to tell you church. So you go to school and you're 4 or 5 or 6, and all of society is this kind of funnel that says you are small, adults will protect you, trust adults, believe adults. And in Ireland, when I was a child, the teacher would go 2 + 2 is 4.
Yeah.
Ring, end of the lesson. Now it's religion lesson.
Yeah.
God lives in the sky with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to go, well, that's obviously bullshit. And the other one, and for years they carried on as if it was a scientific fact. This is the problem. They convey it and they communicate it with the same certainty as 2 + 2 is 4. A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
Yeah.
And so you're like, well, they know. And by the time you have the possibility of maybe even considering doubt, well, you've been in it, like you've been living in North Korea for like 10 years at that point.
Yeah.
You know?
You're the celestial North Korea. It's,
Yeah.
And it, as you said, it is very prevalent. And I mean, I have a particular friend who, he's not so hot on the whole atheism, the focus on atheism around the world, in the sense that he just feels to him anyway, it's an irrelevancy, because he doesn't think it's quite as important. I think it's a little bit more important than he does.
I think when 88% of the world's population profess to believe in something beyond the physical, it's an issue.
Oh no, it is an issue. I think though the point he has been trying to make, and I've come to the mindset that there's some validity to that, is that it's not just about religious faith-based thinking, but all faith-based thinking.
Yes.
Certainly for many of us, religious faith-based thinking is the beginning of it.
I was telling Rachel downstairs, like, you blew my mind last year when we had the discussion
about economics.
And I was like, scoffing, yeah, right, you know, an economy without money, all right, hippie boy.
Yeah.
I had never had that discussion, and I'm not thick.
Yeah.
And I'm not uneducated.
Well, I mean, except when you're talking to someone else, of course.
Absolutely.
But
you know, hands up, who's the Nobel Prize winner?
Yeah. I was tired.
I think you're right, though. Like we were talking earlier today, there's a lot of lack of skepticism even within the atheist movements. You know, whether it's regards to economics or in regards
politics
to,
or cultural,
or how the medical industry works, or how science works in general. I mean, you look at people like Bill Maher, and I like what he does with the religious side of things, but he's an anti-vaccine crank.
That really hurt. I mean, I only found that out this week. That really hurt. That's like, I can't like you anymore. And it's not that I can't like, or like I can't give myself to you. I'm just going to go, well,
in a Sam Harris
way.
In
a way, like I kind of try. Sam Harris has never said anything. I kind of, well, that's bollocks. But if he thinks that, it's like, oh man, stay off my side.
I mean, you're right, and there's many other voices within the science science community, excuse me, the atheist community, or indeed the skeptic community.
Yeah.
Even recently, now I'm as always, you and I have no problem with anyone correcting us.
Yep.
Any one of our 9 fans or anyone else they may share this with wants to correct anything we say here, we're always happy to be put in the right direction. But I was recently visiting the Irish Skeptic Society's website,
Right.
and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it does say that they don't seem to have an issue with people believing in God. Now, it could be that they're simply saying we welcome everybody and we're happy to have that discussion, but I got the impression it was almost like they were circling, we're not atheists, and you don't need to be atheist to be skeptic. Now,
there does seem, I mean, I've certainly perceived this and coming to this, I came very late in life to atheism. I've only been an atheist for 8 years now, I think, at this point. And so I kind of went through my ramp from a believer to a non-believer, and then what I found out by getting into atheism was that the type of non-belief I had was actually skepticism.
Right.
Yeah. And actually it was atheism that kind of enabled me to actually grab onto science, but it was the scientific method I've been kind of looking for all my life.
All the time, yes.
And once I got that, it was like, oh yeah. So I suppose that there might be many more people out there who are the same kind of as that. So maybe you can get them to become a skeptic by addressing the religious issue per se with the rest. But that seems to be the opposite way around, which I find.
I think it happens both ways. Like you have atheists who are certainly not skeptics.
Yeah.
And you also have skeptics who haven't yet realize that atheism is the logical conclusion
of skepticism.
Absolutely. So, which again, these are the kind of people I would like to, I suppose, challenge in relation, or not the people themselves, but certainly some of the thoughts that haven't been brought, I would argue, all the way towards full analysis, full skeptical analysis, because I don't, as I said, there are many reasons why these things may be done in the way they're done. Sometimes it's just, as you said, maybe it's just a process and we have to get there step by step. Or sometimes it's just some organizations or some groups just decide that they aren't going to tackle these questions because they don't want to deal with the fallout that most definitely can occur.
Or they just don't want to draw lines in a particular area.
In a particular area,
I can see the strategy.
Yeah, so it could be just a strategy, and I hope that that's the case. But we do see quite often.
I would definitely rather have a skeptic believer.
Yes, than a non-skeptic believer. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But
an atheist AIDS denier.
Oh, absolutely. And there are many. I like that.
I know God didn't do it, but I definitely think the chimpanzees did.
I do like that. Yes. But yeah. Anyway, I think with my friends, I'll keep at them. Hopefully, I might be able to get them to change their positions. But I think most importantly, I see that skepticism and critical analysis is a big problem for them. In that it's just not even within their field of vision. It's not that they object to it, it's just they're not even aware of it.
Yeah.
And so I always seem to have to bring the conversation back to that level. Yeah. We can't get to the actual point that I want to discuss because we're not talking the same language. We're
it's difficult to try to appeal to them on that level. It's like as Sam Harris says, if someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide?
You have rights to get them to do that.
And actually, I've found. Sorry, hang on.
Go ahead.
Going to open another can. There we go. I know in conversations with believers, and I've learned now, if I want to get into a conversation, have a proper, as in, I'm going to go full tilt here. I'm not going to be constrained by the context of where we are, and I will always ask for permission from the person I'm speaking to before I kind of engage in that. But I also ask them this one other question, which is there anything I can say that will change your mind?
Yes, yeah.
And they usually say no.
And they always say no. And the only one I try, in that case then, if I get one thing to say, then I just kind of say, well, explain amputees to me.
Yes.
Because that's what worked for me. And
you have said that was one of the examples from Dawkins.
If you're a logical person, you cannot refute the amputees' argument. You just can't.
Yeah. But as I think we were again talking today, it is a value set. There's a value. There is a point where there is a philosophical choice made where you decide to value evidence more than faith, or you decide to value faith or emotion or whatever.
I didn't know that. Here's the point. I didn't know that they were two separate things, and I think actually that's the point.
Yes.
I didn't know that they were two separate things.
That valuing
that evidence and faith were because here's what I had given it zero thought. Like I'm talking,
Yes.
I was in my 30s, man.
Yeah.
I had bought and sold 2 or 3 properties in this country.
Yeah.
Right.
Before you were even at that
before
point.
that thought even was pinged, and it was. I'd love to say it came out into my head. It didn't. It was prompted by Richard Dawkins on a TV program.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't even take. It was a stimulus response to somebody else.
Yeah. To somebody. Yeah.
So I think. So I think therefore we've always got one of right. This is a kind of a sidetrack, right? The only sport I ever got into was Formula 1, because in Formula 1 when I started watching it, and then I got out of it because it's just sport and it's a fucking waste of time, right? You know, like when there's so much other stuff to learn about the world. But
Stay
I get
in
it.
sport, kids.
But I get it. I get it. You know, I get why people kind of get into sport and stuff.
Yeah.
Now. But the reason I liked it is they explained the rules of Formula 1 every single time you watched it.
Right.
Every single time you watched it. So it'd be like NASCAR. So like if every time you watch NASCAR, and this is what the rules are. So, because soccer, at no point when you watch a soccer game do they explain what the offside rule is. You're supposed to just know this. You're supposed to just fucking have divined this, or someone has taught. The Big Daddy has told
the
you
authority figure
what
has
this
explained
is.
it to you.
Rugby is likewise.
Yeah.
And of course, Formula 1 explained what the rules were, so I could kind of get into it and like it.
Right.
And I kind of thought, well, that's how you take people from a point of unawareness to a point of awareness.
Exactly.
It's education there surely has got to be the core thing we do.
Yeah, you start from a point of I do this again with my own students. I tell them, look, first of all, we have to start from a position of truth. We have to admit to ourselves what we do know and what we don't know. And quite often it's usually easier to admit what you do know, because then we can just assume everything else you don't. And then once we're there, because quite often I find in many of the things that we're doing, be it programming or mathematics, that the issue is not actually the question being asked, but some other issue that they had prior to that from many years back or whatever, and they just never got over that hurdle.
Okay.
And
really?
Yeah. It's
you
usually
got mathematical prejudice.
Oh well, it's usually they had
dogma.
Usually a methodology that they thought they understood, they didn't, and they just executed without any real clarity of what they were achieving, and as a result it usually worked and sometimes didn't, but they never knew why.
Okay.
And so then when they had to apply it in a different way or in a different context, then all of a sudden their original gold standard of
are you guys doing okay?
But yeah, I find if we do that, if I do that, I usually am able to get somewhere closer to where we need to be. Never actually where we need to be. And I think that's what you're kind of saying here, is that we need to start with that education. We need to figure that out first.
One of the tactics I've found that actually does work sometimes in trying to get someone on the same page is to try to ask them the question of what metrics they're using to actually evaluate the decisions or the assessments that they're making. So if they're just deciding whether it's their position on gay marriage or their position on vaccines or GMOs, if they're just deciding it based on what feels right to them or what some expert that they really like says, or something like that.
Sorry.
Well, obviously that's not a very reliable metric. So I try to say, okay, well, how do we develop a reliable metric? And it goes back to what I started this talk with is, again, you got to appeal to the consensus of experts. How can you have a more reliable metric than what the majority of experts who've studied this information for their entire lives come to an agreement on?
Now, okay, so this is from outside that. So because that sounds amazing, but how do I, someone who is not scientifically trained or scientifically literate, access the consensus opinion of the majority of? Because there isn't not every scientists don't have a thing on every issue. Well, place your coin in this one. So how do we do that?
Well, it depends what the issue is. Certain ones are easier to find than others. If it's something like climate change or vaccines or evolution, you just type that word in scientific consensus, and it's pretty obvious there's a massive scientific consensus for all those issues.
Unless you type in evolution in the Bible, in which case you tend to get the other way around.
And so then we can go into discussion as to which organizations are reputable, and looking at polls as to reputable scientists, discussing what their views are in a particular field. So, like, I don't know, take climate change, for example, and you look at all the peer-reviewed articles that have been published in reputable journals between, like, I don't know, the last 20 years or something, and it's 97 to 98% of them all agree with the proposition that humans are
causing climate change.
Climate change, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just one example, and you can do that. You can break it down for a multitude of subjects.
Yeah.
And even for even more obscure subjects like, I don't know, whether take the gay marriage thing, whether same-sex couples can raise kids as
effectively as a straight couple.
I haven't looked at that in detail. There's probably not like a formalized scientific consensus that it's as good as others, but you could probably find a position statement amongst psychological associations. I'm just guessing here.
That's correct. There is actually a very clear position statement, but you're absolutely right. And I was actually I know people like to bash Wikipedia, and there are many reasons to do that. But I actually have found, in my use of Wikipedia over the last 5 or 6 years in particular, to be relatively reliable in that the kind of positions it's putting forward seem to be in conjunction with
topic. If it's a big topic,
when you start going into more obscure topics, I agree. Yeah. But for example, I did myself in preparation for the current campaign have a look at what Wikipedia's article said in relation to LGBT parenting, and it pointed out, because that is a big topic, and it pointed out all the sources that any other reputable article that I would have read would point out at.
So what did it say?
So, its basic conclusion is that, and it starts, in fact, the very first paragraph, at least when I last accessed, starts with that the conclusion is that there is no fundamental difference between genders, or having either two people of the same gender or two people of a different gender raising children, and that there is so I think the Department of Law, possibly the Faculty of Law at Columbia, have analysed the thousands or so of reports and trials and experiments and whatever else that have been done in this area, and out of all of those, they say only 75 meet the criteria to be that one would expect in terms of peer-reviewed publications, and out of those 75, 71 say not an issue. The other 4 are perhaps inconclusive or leaning towards there might be an issue. So I think I calculated this as 94.6% of the data we have available. And actually, it's one of the things I've explained to my friends, and in fact, one of sorry, I don't want to go too much back into that, but I think the Wikipedia thing is not a bad way of starting.
Yeah, it's a good jumping off point.
Which is the way I use it.
You can educate your questions to then go back and do further research.
Exactly. I always like looking at the references. I like then to jump into the references, and if I see them, I like to try and question it and see data that counters it. So I think that's a really good starting point.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
I think something that you said rings very true, and it's something that I came up against again with not only my friends but other people in relation to any topic, and that is the answers are not yes or no.
Yeah.
Right.
And science doesn't give us yes or no answers. Even if we did have lots of research and lots of studies, the answers aren't yes or no.
But science doesn't have any yes or no.
No, exactly.
I mean, because 1 + 1 may not be equal to 2 in some other dimension we can't imagine.
Us computer scientists tend to stick in binary.
That's the logic, and those do have yes or no answers.
Yes. But you're right. The scientific consensus, or I mean, it's Richard Feynman's ever closer approximations to the truth, not the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
Ever closer approximations to it. So I think we are.
And we also know that, there was this Vox article that was published maybe a couple months ago now, and it found that something like, I can't remember the time frame of this, but it was out of 100 medical trials that were done on different drugs, I think only 5 of them led to drugs that actually got manufactured and put to the market, and only one of them was actually in common use.
Yeah.
So it just shows that science works very slowly and usually fails. It takes a lot of error before something can actually be achieved.
Yeah.
And that's not really sexy to the average person.
No,
right?
no, definitely.
It doesn't make media headlines.
No.
Yeah.
Right. So it tends to often be misrepresented, and
well, in fact, it looks like science is actually stymieing progress,
right.
and trying not to bring new stuff to bear for whatever insert conspiracy theory here. Big Name the industry. You know?
And scientists trying to stop it or something.
Big fast food.
Yeah. And I mean, this comes back down to your point in relation to education. People not only do not know how the scientific method works, which I most certainly counted myself as one of those people, which Matt has helped me understand through many of his fantastic videos, and you should check them out on YouTube. All of them, yeah.
But actually start off with your one for the scientific method.
Yes, absolutely, brilliant.
If you only spend 45 minutes after this, that's the 45 minutes you spend.
A well worth a video. I definitely will.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. The understanding that is as I said, there's a number of things here that most people don't get. They don't get the valuing of evidence of reason. They don't get
because they weren't. And I think that because even our language they don't get.
Yeah.
As if they don't get it.
Yeah.
It's like they don't. It's like it's literally like not being able to speak a language. I didn't even realize this language. I didn't realize this language was available. This was like I discovered there's a whole other way of observing reality.
Yeah.
That just. How come I didn't know about this? How come I managed to make it all the way through this
of our
I
curriculum.
didn't know about
and
this?
yes, we don't. It is.
It's not even like you discover. Oh no! In the way you kind of like you must if you want to do commerce on this planet, you must do one of two languages. You must do Chinese or you must do English. That's it, mate. You just got to do it. There's no other way around it.
Yeah.
Well, likewise, it's like there's a whole other way of looking at reality. It's called a scientific method. It's based on reality. It's measurable.
Yeah.
We've got data.
Testable, falsifiable.
And you don't make a decision up before you see the data. You look at the data and go, oh, that's what actually reality is.
Happened, yeah.
And I didn't even know that.
And of course, the willingness to change your mind. So, in fact, you were saying about different strategies when approaching people, trying to get them, like the metric one, which I was smiling at when you said, because when I first had this question with my particular friend, at Christmas in relation when he raised the question, because we knew the referendum would come up this year, he raised this whole hierarchy of good parenting. I said, by what metric do you decide? I said, define good parenting or define better parenting. Awesome. And because in fact one of the things he's studying in his own work is actually metrics. So I thought it wasn't about
come on, buddy.
And of course he couldn't, because every time he defined it in terms of another term that was undefined. And I said, look, let's. And I was trying to explain to him, this is not legal trickery. I'm trying to play with words. You give me any definition at all, and we'll work with that, and we'll see what we get. And so there was that, trying to be precise. And then the other thing that I try to do as a strategy before now I start many discussions, if we end up going into a discussion with anyone in relation to any contentious issue, I say, are you willing to change your mind? Mm-hmm. Okay, and I tell them, look, I think I'm willing to change my mind. I'm not trying to say I'm better than you, I'm definitely not, but I think I am. I think I'm in a place where I might be able to do it, and I know that what it would take is evidence. And I try to get them to not necessarily commit to that, but at least just think about it, because I know, in fact, they're not committed to that.
Yeah, if you know what evidence or pieces of information it would take to change your mind, then you're applying skepticism.
Yeah, exactly.
You're worth
exactly.
while
Yeah.
having a conversation with.
But what I generally find is they're not.
Right.
They're not. Or in fact, sometimes I get the answer, like you were saying, no evidence will ever be presented, and I'm just like, I'm not.
How can you exist?
I'm not saying that the evidence doesn't definitely exist. Maybe it doesn't. But I'm saying, if some evidence existed, would you change your mind, and what would that evidence look like? And I still get.
But and again, I'm going back to my pre-skeptical state, and I'm literally a little bit has been added to my personality by this. So it's not like I've had a total personality transplant. So I can remember a time when I just didn't think those thoughts.
Yeah. Me too.
Feeling that you believed something gave it credibility. That kind of equaled evidence.
Yeah.
That a strength of belief was a form of evidence. Mm-hmm. And then so you bring your beans of this and observations, and I can bring my beans of belief, and let's put them on a scale and see if the scale balances.
Yes.
And not realizing that that's not how
science works. No,
that's not how the universe works.
Yeah. And that's what it is to be trapped in a method of thinking, is you're not aware that you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I find that these people don't even understand they don't even have a method of thinking about things or coming to conclusions about things.
Yeah.
And they don't even know that they don't have
the methods. Yeah.
Like,
They're just doing it. It's almost a reaction. It's
when you
almost
hear a new
instinct.
piece of music, or you see a new dance, or you see a new movie, or you see a new something, a new piece of slang that you've never heard before, and slang is always evolving.
Like crack.
Exactly. Well, there you go. Exactly, right? And all of a sudden you kind of, that was sitting there all the time, but I didn't know it was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was like, to me, it was like, because once you get involved with the scientific method, you realize, that's how we got civilization. That's why we're not living in caves.
Yeah.
Is that the scientific method plus imagination equals progress?
Yeah.
That's basically it, man. Like that's it.
That's
or
a
do the way
beautiful
around,
equation. I
or
really
whatever.
like it. Yeah,
But like it's the two of them together.
Yeah.
That's how we got here.
Yeah.
You know. That's why we're not sacrificing children. As Sam Harris says so beautifully, you go back 100 generations and you will find someone in your family line who thought they could kill a child to influence the weather. And it's just like...
You don't need to go a few generations, there are plenty
He
of
said
people
that
who
as
think
well.
that.
He said some of them... And then, like, because he's such a great guy, goes, some of you just have to go home for Christmas.
That's great.
That's brilliant.
Beautiful.
That's brilliant.
It's beautiful.
Well, listen, I tell you what, maybe we should round it up here. I think this is an interesting conversation. You and I have touched on this before, and no doubt we'll touch on it again. I think what we really love to do is encourage our atheist and humanist and skeptic brothers and sisters to definitely make sure that they're applying this across the board, not just to the topics that they also enjoy talking about, as do we, but to everything. And
how do we help? How do we get somebody? Because my marketing training tells me one thing: there are acceptors of every proposition, there are rejectors of every proposition. Don't spend a calorie in those two camps because you can't get them.
Right.
What you go for is the potentials, the people who are on the fence. So how do we make the next? How do you take somebody who does know nothing about skepticism to now take the first step towards skepticism? That's our job.
Right. Yeah. Well,
the purpose of a system is what it does. We want to make more skeptics.
So, I think that actually, by the way, the purpose of a system, what it does from Stafford Beers, I think I might have got that from you too. Yeah. So from another fantastic discussion that you and Ben had about Stafford Beers. So thank you again, Matt.
The most mind-blowing sentence I'd ever heard in my life.
That
purpose of the system.
I love it, and actually it is great to hear. And again, it's something that Matt had highlighted, I think, in that particular podcast. And just to embarrass Matt further, my answer to your question is, I think we should point them to the first to that 45-minute discussion on science. Yeah. I think if
I would actually.
Where would you put?
Well, I recommended at the beginning of the talk the Stephen Novella series. In fact, anything by him I'd recommend. But yeah, his lecture and course called Your Deceptive Mind. Right. You can get a few of them on YouTube, actually.
Your Deceptive Mind.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we
shall link to that.
I was just going to say, we'll definitely put the links to all of this, all that we've talked about today, and in particular to the novella stuff, in order to try and give people that next step. But it's definitely something...
Because our nine listeners may know somebody on the fence. Yeah. And so in their case, then...
We want to enable them
to equip them
yes.
with the good stuff.
Brilliant. Absolutely. So we'll put all of those links together. And thanks very much, Matt, for joining us for this our second podcast of this year. We're a little behind. We have to do a few more. That's my fault, folks. But thanks so much for joining us, and we will talk to you again. Bye bye.
What this looks like imprisonment. What's worse is that the prisoners don't know that they're prisoners. Even defend the tactics that they used to imprison them. A conquered mind, trying to conquer other minds, selling them out here on you. What this looks like imprisonment. What's worse is that the prisoners don't know that they're prisoners. Even defend the tactics that they used to imprison them.